You have to really have an ability to listen to your own gut, and that to me is the thing that really sets the great entrepreneurs away from the good entrepreneurs, because all of these guys go through periods where things look absolutely horrible and everyone is telling them that they're stupid and their idea is wrong. I mean, Mark always laughs about all these stories about how he moved to the Valley and was this overnight sensation. He's like, funny, that wasn't my experience at all. I remember for 2 years being told I was going to be the next Friendster at best, and I was a total idiot. And I mean, I think having your own internal compass and having your vision and being that combination of idealistic and delusional and maybe cocky and overconfident, a lot of things that would tend to make someone maybe not the best boyfriend or best friend actually makes a great entrepreneur.
People tell you that as well, don't they, Rob? So, who should we be? Sorry. Who should we be looking at? Who's the new Mark Zuckerberg?
I think we've been in a real trough of innovation, particularly with the web. I mean, so I don't have a company that just leaps out at me that's going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg in terms of capacity of building a huge business. I mean, I always have to look at this as, is this an interesting product that I want to use? Is this something Silicon Valley gets excited about? And is this something where you can really build a big business? And I think there aren't very many of those that we've seen in the last couple of years. I think, in fact, I would say a big difference between the first wave of the internet and this one is that the companies in this wave are far more embedded into our lives and are far more socially transformative in a really deep way, but there will probably be fewer big public companies that come out of it. But, you know, I'm spending a lot of my time outside the Valley now. I did this book tour in the U.S., and I went to 15 different cities and, you know, did kind of huge parties of entrepreneurs. And so I just met thousands of entrepreneurs around the country. And, you know, I'm hoping to do more of that sort of internationally in the next year. Because I think with the web, if you look across music, if you look across, you know, finance, if you look across any industry, when the web disrupts an industry, what it's great at doing is sort of taking these gatekeepers and completely disintermediating them, like taking all this money and power and market share and almost throwing it into a shredder, and it goes out to a million pieces. And I think the web has sort of done that to the nature of startups itself. So I think you're going to see more that's really not coming out of Silicon Valley.
The investment climate in Silicon Valley, how's it at the moment, both from the perspective of angels and venture capitalists?
Really what's happening right now in venture capital, and what I think is going to happen over the next couple of years, is actually the delayed reckoning that never happened to them after 99 and 2000. They were really the only part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem that didn't really get punished, and there was no correction, and there was no sort of change in how they did their business. And that's been sort of hanging over the Valley for quite a while. And I think two things are going to happen. One, you've got all the people that invest in venture capitalists. Over the last 8 years, their portfolios were going up and up and up, and if they had a 10% allocation and they had to put it in alternative assets, they wanted to pump more and more money into venture capital, whether they wanted the money or not. So you never had the subpar firms getting weeded out. You never had to start winning an environment that everyone expected, and that certainly startups had and everyone else. You know, this is one of the first times, certainly in American financial history, that every single part of investors' portfolios are down right now. And so their allocations are falling rapidly. So anyone who's looking to raise money as a venture firm is really, really screwed, and there's nothing that can be done about it.
I've heard a few times about people struggling to close funds.
Yeah.
Actually closing their sort of next fund.
Yeah, and really, having a hard time. I think the other thing is, everyone talks about venture capital being a long-term investment, and so even though the last 8 years the returns have been pretty horrible, particularly for the amount of money that's been pumped in, people have been okay with it because people always look at the 10-year index. The 10-year index includes 99 and 2000. So in another year or so, that's going to fall off. I don't think any of us think there's going to be a rip-roaring IPO market next year. So they're about to get in a world of pain that actually has very little to do with what's happening now. It has to do with the late 90s. It's been a very slow-moving train wreck.
And what's the impact of that on sort of the entrepreneurs?
In web, there's so many angels, and it's not hard to get money if you're in Silicon Valley, and you're trying to raise money for a web startup. You don't need that much, and there's so many angels that you can easily. You can bootstrap it yourself frequently. It's the first time in sort of modern Silicon Valley history that venture capitalists are making the least amount of money. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg owns 30% of Facebook, which is astounding given how much money they've raised. I think Kevin still owns about 30% of Dig. You know, when Max and Peter sold PayPal to eBay for $1.5 billion, Max made about $30 million, Peter made $60 million. And compare that to Mark Zuckerberg. Like, let's just say maybe Facebook even goes for, just $1 billion. He's making 300 million. I mean, Peter will actually probably make more from having seeded Facebook than building his own company.
What do you think
PayPal.
Facebook's, if it was, let's say it was a stock, it was publicly, what would you consider its current valuation to be? Market cap?
Well, I think Mark's been smart not to take it public because they haven't figured out their business model and it's impossible to know. I think right now it would be plummeting because look, they're doing about 300 million in revenue, so conservatively it'd be $1 billion company, but it's...
Because I've heard there's been a lot of people talk about the meeting where he turned down $1 billion. What's your take on that meeting?
See, I can tell you've read the book.
Yeah, I know.
Robert.
Sorry.
I flipped through it.
I'm going to read it to Robert later. It's fine.
I actually
Sounds
read it
very
on
cozy.
a flight back from San Francisco, but I was quite tired.
When it comes out on tape, Robert will listen to it.
So it's fascinating because it's so easy for us to all look back now and be like, oh, obviously he did the right thing. But that was incredibly ballsy and controversial at the time.
Yeah.
And what happened was, Mark has just added Mark Andreessen to the board, so there's 4 people. But at the time, it was just Jim Breyer from Excel, Peter Thiel, and Mark Zuckerberg. And that was the entire board of the company. And Mark also had 3 seats. So basically, he owned he was the biggest shareholder, and he had 3 of 5 seats on the board. So he could do whatever he wanted, and so it was really up to him. And so what happened was Yahoo had come in. They'd gotten smaller sort of interest from Viacom and some other players, but sort of never really turned into a deal on the table, and they didn't want to waste the time to go out and do it. But they actually got the deal from Yahoo. It was for $1 billion, and Mark convened the board meeting by looking at his watch and saying, well, 8:30 seems as good a time to turn down $1 billion as any. He was not even going to consider it. So Peter Thiel spent 8 hours arguing with Mark about why he should consider the deal, why he should even have a conversation about whether to sell the company for $1 billion. And he would have netted more than 300 million personally off of it.
It's
so
hard
finally,
to know whether he's really awesome or a dick, isn't it? When you
I'm
torn at the moment.
This is the delusional sort of crazy, and this is before platform. This is when Facebook was. People would have thought that was a crazy amount. Jim Breyer from Excel thought the most Facebook would ever be worth. His stretch goal for the exit would be 750 million. So he was like, we're turning down $1 billion without discussing it. But Mark got very good coaching when he came to the Valley about when you take venture capital, it's not your company anymore. So he built these things in because he knew things like this would happen. And I think everyone can agree he probably made the right call. But interestingly, then Yahoo screwed it up, which I work for Yahoo part-time, and I frequently talk about all the things they screw up, so it's sort of amazing I have a job. But yeah, so then Yahoo's stock fell by 20%, and so then they somehow thought that discounted Facebook by 20%, which makes no sense. And so they came back, and Mark was willing to consider it, and they said, we want to discount this by 20%, and he was like, no. And then they never talked again.
Interesting.
Would you turn down $1 billion, Robert?
Turn down 50 quid.
I can buy you right now for the change.
I like the idea you'd never be in a meeting at 8:30 in the morning as well.
Yeah. I think we're also having this discussion about selling oneself in a strip club.
Yeah.
I like the fact that we're basically doing an interview with somebody who's like a woman who's succeeded in a man's world, and Rob thought, what would be the right venue for this? I know. We'll get a strip club. That sends out exactly the right signals.